This is little Václav or Vena, born October 5th, 1936. Fair hair, stocky build, chubby cheeks. Who can imagine one day he'll grow into a world-famous writer, spend 4 years in jail, marry twice, and become president 4 times? Certainly not him. When Vena was 9, World War II ended. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis had been defeated, and the world hoped for a better tomorrow. The Havel family also hoped for that. They were known in Prague and throughout Czechoslovakia. Václav's grandfather built the famous Lucerna Palace, and his uncle created Barrandov Film Studios. It seemed nothing stood in the way of Vena and his little brother Ivan enjoying a fine education and career. But in 1948, the Communists, controlled by the Soviet Union, seized power in Czechoslovakia and stripped the Havel family of not only most of their property, but also their influence and freedom to decide on their own lives, just like most other Czechoslovak citizens. It was the start of long decades of repression, political trials, censorship, violations of human rights and freedoms, and travel bans. Like thousands, Václav Havel was barred from the grammar school of his choice due to his class background. He became a chemical lab technician. With characteristic perseverance, he earned a grammar school diploma at evening classes while working. Václav Havel dreamed of one day working in film, just like his uncle Miloš. After military service, he ended up as a stagehand at the theatre on the balustrade. He fell under the spell of theatre and began writing plays. In the 1960s, life gradually improved in Czechoslovakia. Václav Havel's life also took a turn for the better. The young stagehand's first play, The Garden Party, was a hit and was even performed abroad. In 1964, Václav marries his girlfriend Olga, an unconventional Žižkov girl with a twinkle in her eye and a love of books and theatre. Hope was in the air during the 1968 Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia. The atmosphere changed in the country. Even the communists spoke of reform and the need for liberalization. The Soviet Union saw things differently. On the 21st of August 1968, the tanks of the Soviets and their allies rolled into Czechoslovakia. They stayed for 20 long years. The period came to be called normalization, but there was nothing at all normal about it.
Vyzývám vládu, aby odvolala omezení, která byla v posledních týdnech dána sdělovacím prostředkům.
Václav Havel opposes the occupation and publicly calls for the defense of democracy, and soon finds himself on the list of banned writers. His plays are prohibited in Czechoslovakia. He and Olga leave Prague for a cottage at Hradeček in East Bohemia. In this period, the world-famous playwright works for some months as a labourer in the Trutnov brewery, turning his experiences into the successful play Audience. He's constantly in the sights of the police. The STB secret police build a lookout hut opposite his cottage, monitoring all those in contact with the couple. Police harassment doesn't silence Václav Havel. In April 1975, he writes an open letter to Gustav Husák, head of the Communist Party and future president. In the letter, he strongly criticizes communist policies and the state of society. The communist regime hated not only free-thinking writers, but all those who stepped out of line. In 1976, members of the independent rock band The Plastic People of the Universe are also arrested. In protest at their unjust imprisonment, a group of opponents of the regime and dissidents, unafraid to call out what was happening in the country, coalesce. They send the Charter 77 declaration, criticizing the Husák regime for failing to respect human rights, around the world. The regime is furious. Hundreds are signing Charter 77. Václav Havel becomes one of its first spokespeople. For defending freedom, he himself is soon arrested, interrogated, and jailed. Nevertheless, he continues his fight for freedom over the years. He puts out banned books, holds home concerts and seminars, and writes plays, essays, and articles. An essay of his from that time, The Power of the Powerless, remains a major inspiration for opponents of totalitarianism around the world. Thanks to their activities, Havel and his friends are repeatedly jailed. In 1979, he finds himself behind bars for 4 years for being one of the defenders of the unjustly prosecuted. He sends his wife philosophical letters from prison that were later published as Letters to Olga. In 1983, Václav Havel suffers a serious bout of pneumonia in jail. The regime's afraid the world-famous prisoner will die behind bars, and major international pressure results in Havel's release on probation. He keeps writing. His plays are performed abroad, and his essays shine a light on repression under the communist regime. Václav Havel earns respect and becomes leader of the Czechoslovak opposition. At the end of the 1980s, totalitarian regimes begin falling one by one in Central and Eastern Europe. Revolution also comes to communist Czechoslovakia. A brutal crackdown on a student demonstration on November 17, 1989, sparks a major wave of protests, dubbed the Velvet Revolution by foreign journalists. Leaders of the Civic Forum, headed by Václav Havel, negotiate a handover of power with the communists. A week later, Havel, who just a few weeks earlier was back in jail, shouts into the mic before 750,000 demonstrators at Prague's Letná. On December 29th, Václav Havel is paradoxically elected head of state by communist MPs, on condition free elections be held within 6 months. Until 2003, Václav Havel was repeatedly elected president, first of Czechoslovakia and then, after its breakup, which he failed to prevent, of the Czech Republic. Despite all the mistakes, justified and unjustified criticism and eternal self-doubt, Havel manages to fulfill many of his goals as president. He helps to renew democracy and freedom and to return the Czech Republic to the map of Europe and the democratic world. There was no time for theatre, but Václav Havel didn't stop writing. Unlike other politicians, he wrote his own speeches. In them, he called on people to take an interest in the world around them and criticised power-hungry politicians. His speeches, like his earlier essays, appealed to morality and displayed concern for nature and the planet. After leaving office, he fulfilled another dream. He directed a film based on his final theatre play, Leaving, which also featured his second wife, Dagmar. Václav Havel was a writer barred from doing what he most wanted to do, yet he achieved more in life than many literary figures put together. He died on December 18, 2011. Thousands of people from around the country paid their respects by his coffin, and hundreds of world politicians, artists and intellectuals expressed their grief. Václav Havel was remembered not only as a politician or freedom fighter, but also as a wonderful companion, an idiosyncratic chef, and a lover of art and architecture. At an extraordinary session on Monday, the 19th of December 2011, the Czech government unanimously approved a bill that read, Václav Havel contributed to freedom and democracy.
Já jsem přesvědčen, že existuje jakési základní mravní minimum, které je všem kulturám společné. Úcta k lidské důstojnosti, respekt k základním lidským svobodám, lidským právům. Zdá se mi, že je důležité toto společné minimum hledat. Děkuji vám za pozornost.